The bombshell didn't drop in a press conference. It wasn't leaked by an insider or whispered through back channels. Sophie Cunningham looked directly into her podcast microphone and said the words that Indiana Fever fans had been dreading. When discussing her contract situation, she didn't say this team. She didn't say hopefully Indiana. She said her next team. Those three words just confirmed what many suspected, but nobody wanted to believe. Sophie Cunningham is leaving the Indiana Fever, and Caitlin Clark's most fierce protector is about to walk out the door. This isn't speculation anymore. This is Sophie Cunningham telling us exactly what's happening, in her own words, on her own platform. And the implications for Caitlin Clark and the entire Fever franchise are staggering. Because what we're witnessing isn't just a roster move. It's the potential unraveling of the most compelling partnership in women's basketball. Let's be clear about what Sophie actually said, because the details matter here. She wasn't being coy or diplomatic. She stated plainly that she's looking for a multi-year contract from her next team so she can finally achieve financial stability and buy a house. Not from Indiana, not from the Fever, from her next team. That phrasing wasn't accidental. This is a player who has already mentally moved on, who is viewing her future through a lens that doesn't include the organization she just spent a transformative season with. If you believe the story behind the story matters, hit that like button right now. Because what we're unpacking today goes way deeper than just one free agency decision. When her podcast co-host brought up potential destinations like the New York Liberty, Sophie's response sent shockwaves through the Fever community. It could be anywhere. Not "I want to stay in Indiana," not "I hope we can work something out." It could be anywhere. That's the sound of a player who has one foot out the door and is already exploring what comes next. And here's what makes this even more explosive. Sophie Cunningham is now an unrestricted free agent. She has the power to sign with any team that offers her the deal she wants, and Indiana has zero special rights to retain her. Many of you have been saying for weeks that something felt off about this situation. You were picking up on the signals, the carefully worded social media posts, the way Sophie was talking about her recovery, the absence of any definitive statements about returning to Indianapolis. You were onto something because Sophie wasn't just being private. She was preparing us for this moment. But here's the complication that makes this entire situation even more dramatic. Sophie's season was cut devastatingly short by a torn MCL. That's not a minor injury. That's a serious knee injury that required surgery and months of intensive rehabilitation. While she's been posting positive updates about her recovery, here's the cold reality. Any team, including the Fever, has to carefully weigh the risk of offering a massive long-term contract to a 29-year-old player coming off major knee surgery with an uncertain timeline for return to full competitive form. So we have a player who desperately needs financial security, a player who just publicly announced she's looking elsewhere, and a player whose medical situation creates enormous questions for any team considering signing her. This is a perfect storm of complications, and it's all playing out in real time. Let's talk about what Sophie Cunningham actually meant to this Indiana Fever team. Because to understand what's being lost here, you have to understand what she provided beyond the statistics. Sophie wasn't just another role player. She was Caitlin Clark's enforcer, her protector, her confidant in the brutal high-pressure world of professional basketball. When opponents got too physical with Caitlin, Sophie was the one stepping in. When the team needed toughness and intensity, Sophie provided it. When someone needed to set the tone defensively, Sophie did the dirty work. Their partnership was forged during the chaos of the 2024 season, a season that tested the Fever in ways nobody anticipated. Both Caitlin and Sophie missed significant time due to injuries. The team's depth was constantly challenged. Their playoff hopes hung in the balance for months, and through all of it, Sophie was the vocal presence in the locker room, the emotional leader who wasn't afraid to get in someone's face to defend her superstar teammate. Connecting the dots here reveals something crucial. Sophie's absence after her knee injury was a massive blow to team chemistry and performance. The Fever struggled without her presence, not just because of her on-court production, but because of the intangible leadership qualities she brought every single night. She was the culture setter, the standard bearer, the player who established what effort and accountability looked like for that roster. And their friendship became something that transcended typical teammate relationships. You all saw it develop throughout the season: the social media interactions, the body language during games, the way they talked about each other in interviews. The attention became so intense that even controversial analysts like Skip Bayless felt compelled to comment, making accusations that were both baseless and offensive about Sophie taking advantage of her friendship with Caitlin for popularity. That external pressure added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Both players had to navigate not just the normal challenges of professional basketball, but an unusual level of scrutiny that few teammate relationships have ever faced. Every gesture was overanalyzed, every post was dissected, every interaction became content for debate and speculation. Now that partnership appears to be ending, and the Indiana Fever's front office is staring down a decision that will define their franchise for years to come. Here's where the business side of basketball collides with loyalty and emotion. The Indiana Fever have one overarching mission: building a championship dynasty around Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. Two generational talents who represent the future of this organization. Every roster spot matters. Every dollar of salary cap space will be scrutinized with that objective in mind. And that means the front office has to answer a brutally cold question. Do they invest a huge long-term contract in a beloved fan favorite who is recovering from major knee surgery and will be 29 years old next season? Or do they let her walk and use that money to pursue other options? Drop a comment right now and tell us what you think the Fever should do. Should they pay Sophie whatever it takes to keep Caitlin's protector? Or is this the kind of tough business decision that championship teams have to make? Because this debate is dividing the fan base, and we want to know where you stand. The financial realities of the WNBA make this decision even more agonizing. Unlike the NBA, where teams can exceed the salary cap to retain their own players, the WNBA has a hard cap. That creates brutal zero-sum situations. Signing one player to a significant deal means less money available for everyone else. The Fever must consider other free agents. They need to build a complete roster around their stars, not just surround them with expensive complementary pieces who may or may not return to full health. Let's filter out the noise and look at what Sophie is actually asking for. She wants a multi-year deal that provides financial stability. She wants to buy a house. These are reasonable goals for any professional athlete, especially in a league where salaries don't compare to their male counterparts. But here's the reality. Sophie is entering the final phase of her career. She's coming off a devastating injury. And she's a role player, not a star, regardless of how beloved she is or how important her intangibles are. Reading between the lines of her podcast comments reveals a player who understands her market value might not match what Indiana can or will offer. That's why she said it could be anywhere. She's preparing herself and her fans for the likelihood that she's playing somewhere else next season, and she's doing it on her own terms, controlling her own narrative rather than letting rumors and speculation define her story. Multiple teams around the league would absolutely love to add a player of Sophie Cunningham's caliber and mentality. The Liberty, Aces, Sun, and other playoff contenders could all make compelling pitches about immediate championship contention that the rebuilding Fever simply cannot match right now. Sophie might decide that at this stage of her career, with her recovery timeline uncertain, she wants to maximize her chances of winning a title rather than being part of a multi-year rebuilding project. But let's talk about that torn MCL, because this is the wild card that changes everything. MCL injuries vary wildly in severity and recovery trajectory. Some players return to full form relatively quickly. Others experience lingering issues with lateral movement, explosiveness, and confidence in the repaired knee. For a player like Sophie, whose entire game is built on defensive intensity, physical play, and the ability to guard multiple positions, any diminishment of her lateral quickness could be career-altering. Teams interested in signing her will require extensive medical evaluations. We're likely to see contract structures that include team options, performance incentives, or injury protections that limit financial risk. This reality factors into Sophie's thinking too. She may be more inclined to take a slightly smaller deal from a team that offers more guaranteed years, providing security if her knee doesn't respond as hoped. Here's what many people aren't considering. The Fever's medical staff and training facilities are top-notch. Sophie has familiarity with them. She knows the doctors, the rehabilitation protocols, the training staff. That comfort level and continuity of care has real value. But apparently, it's not enough to outweigh the other factors pushing her toward a new destination. The reaction from Fever fans has been intense and deeply divided. Social media has erupted with passionate debates. One camp argues that loyalty matters, that Sophie earned a significant contract through her contributions and her unwavering support of Caitlin during a difficult rookie transition. They point to the intangibles she brings and warn that letting her leave would damage team culture and potentially upset Caitlin herself. The opposing view takes a more analytical approach. These fans argue that sentiment cannot drive roster construction at the professional level. They point to Sophie's age, her injury history, and the statistical reality that she's a role player. They argue the Fever have limited resources and must allocate them wisely to players who will be in their prime during the team's championship window, not those whose best years may already be behind them. And you know who's caught in the absolute worst position here? Caitlin Clark. She's remained largely silent publicly, as she's almost certainly been advised to do. Any comment she makes could be interpreted as pressure on the front office. Or if she doesn't advocate strongly enough, it could be seen as a slight to Sophie. It's an impossible situation for a young star trying to balance loyalty to a friend with trust in management's decision-making. We're getting into speculation territory here, but sources around the league suggest that Caitlin is privately devastated by this development. Losing Sophie means losing her biggest protector on the court, her emotional anchor in the locker room, the teammate who had her back no matter what. That's not something you replace easily, no matter how talented your next roster addition might be. This situation has parallels throughout sports history. Teams constantly face decisions about whether to retain the enforcer, the veteran leader, the defensive specialist who plays a supporting role to the superstar. Sometimes they make the cold calculation to move on, betting that the star will adjust. Other times, they prioritize continuity and relationships, even if it's not the optimal basketball decision. What makes this unique is the intense public interest in the Clark-Cunningham relationship specifically. Their friendship became a storyline that transcended typical teammate bonds. It generated massive media attention and fan investment. The ending of this partnership will be mourned in a way that purely basketball-driven roster moves typically aren't. So here's where we stand. Sophie Cunningham has essentially announced her departure through her own candid podcast comments. The Indiana Fever face a franchise-altering decision that will reveal their true priorities, and Caitlin Clark is about to lose her biggest ally while trusting that management knows what they're doing. Is letting Caitlin's protector walk away a devastating mistake that will haunt this organization? Or is this the ruthless, emotionally difficult move that's necessary to build a true championship contender over the next decade? The coming weeks will provide answers, but the implications extend far beyond one roster spot. If you want to stay ahead of every major development in this story, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Because when Sophie officially signs with her next team, we'll break down exactly what it means for Caitlin, the Fever, and the entire WNBA landscape We'll also be diving deep into who Indiana targets to replace Sophie's leadership and toughness. Trust us, you don't want to miss what comes next. What happens next won't just decide Sophie Cunningham's future. It will define the Indiana Fever for years to come. It will signal to the entire league what kind of organization they intend to be. For Sophie, it's about securing her financial future and getting one last significant contract. For Caitlin, it's about potentially losing her closest ally while trusting the process. For fans, it's about whether the team they love makes the right choice at this critical juncture. This is the reality of professional sports. Relationships matter. Loyalty means something. But so do winning and smart decision-making. How the Fever navigate this moment will be studied and debated for years, regardless of the outcome. And we'll be here covering every single development, because this story represents the very human drama that exists beneath the business of basketball. And that's what we're all here for.